The state trooper had been standing at the edge of the guardrail for 20 minutes when the old man's truck came over the rise. He wasn't expecting anyone. The road had been closed since Monday. This was Thursday morning. 3 recovery companies had already come and gone, and the last one had left tire tracks pointing east that told you everything you needed to know about their intentions. The trooper had made 17 phone calls in 3 days. He had run out of people to call. So when he heard the engine, a deep, uneven idle that didn't belong to any modern truck, he turned around slowly, the way a man turns when he's no longer sure what to hope for. It was a 1961 white 9000, long hood, chain-drive rear axle, Holmes 600 boom mounted behind the cab, the steel painted the color of old iron left outside too long. The truck moved at maybe 15 miles an hour, no faster, picking its way up the iced grade with the patience of something that had done this before. The name on the door, faded but readable, HARLAN Son, Pueblo Co. The trooper watched it park, watched the door open, watched a man climb down who was somewhere in his late 60s, wearing a canvas work coat and boots that had seen more winters than the trooper had been alive. The man didn't look at the trooper. He looked at the Kenworth. The Kenworth had been there since Monday afternoon. A 1979 model, fully loaded, industrial generators, 41,000 pounds of them, bound for a power station outside Denver. It had gone over on the downhill curve at mile marker 149, right where the road bent hard left and the shoulder dropped away into nothing. The trailer had jackknifed, and the whole rig had tipped onto its driver's side, the cab hanging partly over the edge of the guardrail, the trailer blocking both lanes completely. 3 recovery companies had looked at the scene and made the same calculation. The ground on the uphill side was sheeted in ice over soft fill, compacted gravel over clay, fine in summer, treacherous in a February freeze-thaw cycle. Any heavy anchor vehicle on that shoulder risked punching through. The angle of the Kenworth's cab over the guardrail meant a straight pull would roll the truck over the edge instead of righting it. All 3 companies had said the same thing: wait for better conditions, plan for a week minimum. Now it was Thursday morning, and the trooper watched an old man in a canvas coat stand at the edge of the road and look at a truck that nobody could move. The old man stood there for a long time, not moving, not speaking, just looking. Then he walked to the guardrail, gripped it with both hands, and looked over the edge at the drop below. He crouched down and pressed his palm flat against the asphalt, feeling it the way a doctor feels for a pulse. He stood up. He walked to the center of the road and looked back up the grade toward where his truck was parked, measuring something with his eyes. His lips moved slightly, like a man doing arithmetic. Then he turned to the trooper. "This rig yours to release?" "At this point it's on my authority," the trooper said. "Road's been closed 3 days." The old man nodded, started walking back toward his truck. "Sir, who called you? This isn't a dispatched recovery." The old man stopped. "Nobody called me. I drive this road every week, have for 22 years. When it's closed, I know why." He looked at the Kenworth one more time. "And I know this corner. 3 companies already looked at this and walked." "I know," the old man said. "I saw their tire tracks." He kept walking. "Now I need to stop here, because what happened next is not the most important part of this story. What happened next is just a recovery. You'll hear about that. But first you need to understand something about this road, and about this corner, and about why an old man in a canvas coat knew things that 3 professional recovery companies did not. The story doesn't start in 1983. It starts in 1962. November 14th, 1962. The first real snow of the season had come early to the Colorado Rockies, and the highway department was still 2 weeks away from having the full winter maintenance schedule running. A man named Roy Harlan was driving a 1958 Kenworth 923 westbound through the pass. 38 years old, 16 years behind the wheel. He had made this run, Pueblo to Denver via the mountain route, more times than he'd bothered to count. He knew this road, He thought he knew it well. He was carrying industrial generators, heavy ones, rear heavy load at the top of legal in a way that Roy's body told him was not quite right. He came into the downhill curve at mile marker 149 at 31 miles an hour. He had driven this curve at 31 miles an hour 100 times. What he didn't know was that the shoulder on the left side had settled 2 centimeters since the last survey. Less than an inch, but enough, in the physics of a rear-heavy load on a curve with a road surface colder than it looked, to change where the grip ended. The truck went over. Roy survived. Broken collarbone, 3 broken ribs, a scar he'd carry the rest of his life. He was pulled from the cab by 2 people who had been following a quarter-mile behind. Roy's son was in the sleeper berth. His name was Dale Harlan. He was 14 years old. Roy had taken him along for the week Thanksgiving break, a chance for the boy to see what his father did. Dale had been asleep when the truck went over. He woke up on his side with his father's blood on his jacket and the sound of a woman from Kansas City talking to him through the broken windshield in a very calm voice, telling him not to move until she was sure nothing was broken. Nothing was broken. Dale Harlan walked away from that accident with a bruised shoulder and something else, a knowledge that settled into him that day and never left. He knew from that moment forward exactly what this corner did. Dale started driving long haul at 19, same routes his father had run. When Roy retired in 1971 and handed Dale the keys to the white 9000, not a new truck even then, a decade old already, Dale took the truck and the routes and made them his own. He made one addition. Every time he drove through the pass, every time he came through that downhill curve at mile marker 149, he stopped on the far side and got out. He crouched down and pressed his palm against the road surface. He looked at the shoulder. He noted the temperature, the ice patterns, the conditions. And he wrote it down. In a standard spiral notebook kept in the glove box, he wrote the date, the conditions, and one of 2 words: pass clear, pass caution, every trip, without fail, for 22 years. His coworkers thought it was eccentric. His dispatcher thought it was a waste of time. His wife thought it was the thing that kept him alive. What the notes told him, over 22 years, was this: the shoulder at mile marker 149 had been settling at roughly 2 millimeters per year, slowly, invisibly, in a way no routine inspection would catch. But ice doesn't lie. Ice forms first where the road surface is lowest. And every year the ice at that corner formed a little further into the travel lane than it had the year before. Dale also knew something else. He knew that the fill under that shoulder, gravel over clay from the 1960s widening project, had a specific behavior in freeze-thaw cycles. In deep winter, hard as concrete. In the transition weeks of late February, it softened from the bottom up. The top crust could hold the look of solid ground while the material underneath had the consistency of wet sand. This was the 3rd week of February, 1983. The 3 recovery companies had been right about the soft fill, right about the anchor risk, right about the angle problem. What they hadn't known was that 40 feet back from the curve on the uphill side, there was a section of original 1940s roadbed that the widening project had left in place as a base layer. Old road, compressed over 40 years of traffic, dense, hard in any weather. Dale Harlan knew exactly where it was. He had pressed his palm against that road surface every week for 22 years. He rigged the white 9000 with the deliberateness of a man who has made no decision he isn't sure of. He positioned the truck not on the shoulder but on the old roadbed section, 40 feet back from the curve. He set his outriggers there, not on the fresh fill, not on the ice shoulder, but on 40-year-old compressed asphalt. He tested each outrigger pad with his full body weight before he trusted it. Then he ran his chain. 2 chains, rigged through a snatch block anchored to the base of a guardrail post on the uphill side, one of the original posts from the 1940s construction, set in concrete that had been curing for 40 years. The angle of the pull through the snatch block was 23 degrees uphill and away from the drop. One of the highway department men who had arrived walked over. "That angle's going to roll it further toward the edge." "No, it isn't," Dale said without looking up. "The cab is already over the guardrail. You pull at that angle." "The cab is over the guardrail," Dale said, "but the trailer's weight is on this side. The trailer is what's keeping the cab from going over. You don't pull the cab, you pull the trailer. The cab follows." The highway department man opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his colleague who shrugged. Dale finished rigging. He walked to the Kenworth and spent 5 minutes under the trailer, chaining to the frame at 2 specific points. He came out covered in road salt and ice crystals and walked back to the white 9000 without cleaning himself off. The trooper came to the window. "If this goes wrong—" "If it goes wrong," Dale said, "the truck goes over the edge and you have a worse problem than you have now, but it isn't going to go wrong." He looked at the trooper. "I've been looking at this corner for 22 years. I know exactly what it does." The trooper held his gaze for a moment, then stepped back. Dale started the winch. The sound of a Holmes 600 winch under real load is not a sound that belongs to this century. It is the sound of something with no governor, no limiter, no computer telling it when to stop. It starts low and builds with the patience of something that does not hurry because it does not need to. The chain went tight, link by link, the slack coming out with a series of low metallic sounds like a very large clock being wound. The snatch block at the guardrail post took the load and held. The 40-year-old post, set in 40-year-old concrete, did not move. The Kenworth groaned. Not the sound of something breaking. The sound of something being asked to move after 3 days of sitting frozen to a road surface, ice bonded to steel bonded to asphalt, all of it resisting. Dale held the throttle steady, not more, not less steady. The highway department men had stopped talking. The trooper had his radio in his hand but wasn't speaking into it. The only sounds were the winch and the wind, and the groaning of the Kenworth '(S) frame. Then the trailer moved, 6 inches, maybe 8. A slight rotation, the rear swinging away from the drop, the geometry of the whole rig beginning to shift. Nobody said anything. Dale increased tension by 10%. The Kenworth moved again. The cab, which had been hanging partly over the guardrail, the thing that had made every recovery company shake their head, began to pull back from the edge. Because the trailer was moving, and the trailer was attached to the cab, and the physics were exactly what Dale had said they were. 15 degrees of rotation. The ice bond between the trailer tires and the road broke with a sound like a rifle shot that echoed off the rock face. 20 degrees, 25, 30. The Kenworth was moving now, definitely, visibly, unmistakably moving. The cab pulling back from the guardrail, the trailer swinging level, the whole rig rotating around the fulcrum Dale had identified and set his chain to. At 35 degrees, the Kenworth found its own balance. The weight distribution crossed the line between falling and standing, and the truck came up under its own gravity, not gently, not quietly, but with the authority of 41,000 pounds finding the ground it was meant to be on. 4 wheels on the asphalt, trailer level, cab back from the edge. The sound of it settling echoed across the pass and faded into the mountains. Nobody moved for a moment. Nobody spoke. Then one of the highway department men sat down on the hood of his truck, not leaning, sat down, like his legs had made a decision without consulting him. Dale climbed down and began uncoupling his chains. He worked without hurrying. The trooper walked over and stood nearby until Dale had coiled the last chain and stowed it. "How did you know the old roadbed was there?" the trooper asked. "Because I watched them build this road when I was 8 years old. My father brought me up here in the summer of 1956. They were widening the pass. He wanted me to see how roads were made. Dale looked at the road surface. They left the original bed in place as a base layer right there. 3 companies looked at this for 3 days, and nobody knew that. They never drove this road, Dale said. They just came to look at the problem. There's a difference between looking at a road and knowing a road. He pulled off his work gloves. My father went over right there, he said. November 14th, 1962, I was in the sleeper. I was 14 years old. He said it the way men say things they've said 1,000 times in their own heads but almost never out loud. After that, I never drove through here without stopping, without looking. After a while, looking becomes knowing. And knowing means you can do something when everyone else says nothing can be done. The trooper had nothing to say to that. Dale climbed back into the white 9000 and drove back the way he'd come, moving at 15 miles an hour, the same speed he'd arrived at. The pass opened to traffic at 11:40 that Thursday morning. The highway department sent a survey crew the following week. They found the settled shoulder. They found the soft fill. They found the original 1940s roadbed exactly where Dale had positioned his outriggers. They put it in a report. The report recommended reinforcement work the following summer. Dale Harlan retired in 1991. He drove his last run on a Tuesday in October, Pueblo to Denver mountain route through the pass. He stopped at mile marker 149, got out, pressed his palm against the road, wrote in his notebook, one word. Clear. He gave the notebook to his son Robert on the day he retired. Every time you go through, Dale said, you stop, you get out, you write it down. Robert looked at the notebook, 29 years of entries. What do I write if something's wrong? You write what you see, Dale said, and then you figure out what it means. That's the whole job. That's always been the whole job. Robert Harlan has driven that pass every week since 1991. He drives the same white 9000 rebuilt twice, same frame, same Holmes boom, same name on the door. He stops at mile marker 149 every time through. He presses his palm against the road. He writes it down. The notebook his father gave him is full. He started a second one in 1998. He's most of the way through a third. Nobody has ever called him for his data. He doesn't mind. He drives his route. He keeps his notes. He knows his corner. There is a kind of knowledge that doesn't live in reports or manuals or engineering degrees. It lives in the body of a man who has done the same thing, in the same place, in every kind of weather, for long enough that the road has stopped being a road and started being something closer to a conversation. Dale Harlan stayed. He listened. And on a Thursday morning in February of 1983, when the pass had been closed for 3 days and the state had run out of ideas, he drove his old truck up the grade at 15 miles an hour and did what he'd spent 22 years preparing to do. 3 companies saw a problem they couldn't solve. Dale Harlan saw a road he'd been reading for 22 years. The difference between those 2 ways of seeing is not expertise. It is not equipment. It is not the size of your fleet or the newness of your truck. It is attention, patient, unglamorous, daily attention, the kind that nobody praises and everybody needs. The kind that shows up on a Thursday morning when everyone else has already driven away.